Welcome to the Sedona Soul Sisters Show, down to earth discussions on metaphysics, spirituality, paranormal, and healing topics. The Sedona Soul Sisters are myself, Ivory Lanou, my business partner Roz, who may pop in later, and Terry Ann Russell, who is here.
I
We
am.
have offices in Sedona, Arizona, where we see clients from all over the world. Today's topic is saying goodbye. So we're talking about a new approach to the way we think about death and how we can help people through that process, both the dying and those who are grieving the loss of them. If you have questions or comments, if you pop in live during the show, you can put your hand up and we'll know to unmute you and you can ask your question live, or you're also welcome to put it into the chat room and I'll see that and we'll answer it live. If you listen to this later, if you're watching the show on YouTube later, email us. Just send us an email. You can send it to ivory@sedonasoulsisters.com and I'll make sure the ladies, we all get it and we'll answer that question for you. So, this is quite the topic right now of all times. I always tell my clients when this comes up, like, death is just a stage of life. It's inevitable. We're all dying a little bit every day, and it's okay because it's just a transition. I don't know.
Yeah,
Do you look at that differently, Tarian?
I do now since Anthony's passed. Before I didn't so much. I don't think I really delved into it. But since Anthony's passed, I really, one of the first things he said was, I'm not dead. I'm in another place, and I'm happy and I'm okay. So that gave me solace knowing that.
As mediums, we're well aware that spirit is not in some other place where they're separated from us, where we have no contact with them, and we see them, we hear them, we feel them. And one thing I say, just to anybody watching right now, is that your loved ones are with you. Your loved ones are trying to get your attention. Comes up in mediumship readings all the time, how they're trying to get your attention, specific things they're doing using electricity, using your iPhone, your smartphones. They love those. Many different ways that they're just trying to let you know. And it seems like those attempts to get attention are getting more dramatic of late.
Yeah. I think, the veil's very thin right now since we've really shifted this year, the year of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's really shifted. So it's like, hey, I'm here. It's time to wake up. I'm here. I'm not gone.
Exactly. And I know right now where there's been a lot of deaths in our country and a lot of people are grieving the loss. On top of the normal deaths we would have from the usual reasons, we have COVID happening right now. So I do know some people who lost family members, and it's making them take a look at this whole thing differently. And I do think that in the midst of all of this craziness, I know people are overall wishing 2020 would just get out. Let's just call it a day and have New Year's right now. But the truth is, we are receiving some blessings as individuals and as the whole of humanity through this time. And one of those is that it is drawing our attention to the topic of death. And so, boy, the angels just came in as I said that.
Mm.
I'm covered in chills sitting here. It's inevitable. Anything and anybody who is born is going to die. We know that. So it's interesting that at some point with our history that we made that such an unnatural thing, a thing to be feared, a thing to be fought, um, because everything I would say, if you boil it down to one thing, is that dying is going home. It's a transition back home.
Yeah.
And no one's sad to go there. There's not a single one of them is saying, gosh, I wish I could get back in those heavy earth bodies and deal with all the drama and trauma you got going there. No.
Right.
But
That's
they do know
funny.
what we're dealing with now. That's coming up a lot, not just for me,
Yeah.
but like worldwide with a lot of mediums and the scientific research on afterlife is that Spirit is well aware of what's happening here on the planet right now. They're very compassionate for us. They're trying to help us from the other side. Sorry that we have to go through this time, but I do feel like it is inevitable. Like we had to go through this time, and death is a part of it.
Right. I do too. And when you say that to some people, they look at you like with these big eyes, like, how could there be anything good coming out of this? Yet there is. As we go through this darkness and this period, we will get to the light, but you have to go through those challenges first to get there. And it is a challenge for a lot of people right now. There's a lot going on with, not working, being in the home altogether. People are used to running, running, running. I used to say bigger, faster, better. We were all in that mode of bigger, faster, better. And when you slow down, it like opens a whole new world for you to see. You're able to see the world through new eyes, and death is one of them. I think after Anthony left, it really took me a while. I still grieved, but I've really been at a place of serenity now because of the relationship that we have. And I think people aren't taught that. They're not taught that, after your loved one passes, that you can have a relationship with them. And that's what's very important to understand.
I really feel like that's part of our emerging role. One of our major roles as mediums is to help them understand that and figure out a way to accomplish that and coach them through it, because in the future there won't be mediums as we know it now, because everybody will be able to communicate with their own deceased loved ones. There's even this thing. I don't remember the name of the scientist, but I'll find out and I'll post this somewhere where you can get the information. But there's a leading afterlife researcher who's developed a phone, and it's working, where you can pick up the phone and it's like you dial the other side and you can talk to your loved one and hear them speaking in their voice, saying words you recognize, having a conversation with you. That's going to be a very commonplace thing in the not distant future. So it'll be that easy to communicate with your deceased loved ones because they're not gone.
Yeah.
So wherever there is birth, there is death. And I think one of the things for me that brought my attention to it so solidly was there was a period of time when I was living down in the Phoenix area, and I had started a spiritual circle down there. And we had a member of our group who was in his 90s, and he was just like putting a toe on the spiritual path. And his girlfriend was just this wide open light worker, just helping him, open as much as possible. And he was trying so hard. And then he passed. And as he started to die, she called. She said, "Ivory, can you come and just be here with him? I want you to help me help him on this transition." And we just sat on either side of the bed, and there was a small group of us in there. And his girlfriend and I were holding his hands and just stroking his hands and talking to him. And I sang him a little bit of songs just to ease it. And the look, like I'd never seen his face so beautiful, like lines just eased away and tension. He had a real stressed look a lot of the time. And as he got closer and closer to that crossing, like everything eased and he looked younger. He looked so radiant, and then he was just gone. He was just gone. And that wasn't the first time that I'd been present for a death like that. But for some reason that one really opened something for me, where I thought, this is such a beautiful moment. Like, people want to be there. Let's say that, one of us had a child. Mine did. She's too old for this now, but had a child, and she gets pregnant. People want to be there. Oh my gosh, let's go to the hospital. Let's be there when the baby's born. We need to find a way to have that kind of, we're not going to get excited about it, but we need to want to celebrate this person's getting ready to transition home. They're getting ready to cross over and be with all their loved ones that have already passed, relatives they never even met, generations back, pets that they had. I mean, just friends are all going to be waiting for them, and they're going to be in this glorious place where you're like breathing love. We should be happy for them. We should be celebrating that. We should be helping them see that as a positive thing. Like but our whole society has gotten into this thing of we need to fight death tooth and nail. Oh no, take more medication, even fight aging. We need to fight aging, aging's bad, that's part of the whole death is bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. I think there was a meme I saw once where somebody was passing and you see the spirit go to the other side and everybody's celebrating and hugging them. And then the people that are left behind here are crying. But yes, it's sad and you'll miss your loved one. But, just knowing that they're happy and they're healthy and they're not in any pain or any suffering, if we can get to that point, I agree. I think it would be beautiful to have that kind of relationship at the end where you're helping somebody.
And so that comes up to the point of death doulas. We've talked about this a little.
Mm-hmm.
One of my dear friends, Beth, hi Beth, wants to be a death doula, and she is a little ray of sunshine. That woman, she used to work for hospice, so it's a natural for her. She would be a fantastic death doula. So if you out there are going like, what in the world is a death doula? It's like a death midwife, just like you'd have a midwife for the birth of a child. That used to be very commonplace. A death doula is a person who assists with the dying process. They're assisting the person who's dying and their family and loved ones with the process to ease them, to comfort them, to make it feel like a natural process, to make it go as well and lovely as possible. And it's usually a community-based role. So each community would have a death doula. It's aimed at helping families cope with death and just seeing it as a natural part of life and helping the dying person not be afraid. Right. So to me, I think that is going to be a major job in the future. I think that will be something that's quite popular.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful because if the whole family could get on board then and see this process as it's occurring. I trained under Four Winds and we did helping transition people that were near death or going to die. And so there's a whole process that we go through while we're doing it. And it's so beautiful. And, the whole family can come together and join in that too. And it can be done remotely as well. Also, if you can't get to the person, like we're in this COVID, very rarely are people allowed in to even say goodbye to their loved ones right now. So
if there's any way to have it happen, if things ease up, anybody in my family that I have the option, or a friend of mine that I know is dying, I plan to do this for the family because I think it's so important to just set that right tone from the beginning of what a joyous moment this is, how I would love to help them as they're getting ready to cross, to admit that they're seeing and feeling and hearing their angels and the spirits of their deceased loved ones, because they come in. That's a big part of the crossing process is somebody's close when they start talking to somebody you don't see there, and they'll say, my angel's here, or angels are here. They'll say, Uncle Bob, my dad's here, my mom's here.
Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps.
Yeah, me too. I feel them. I feel these spirits coming in. They're not hallucinating. That's a part of the process. Is these beings come in to ease them, to help them see. There's a crowd of wonderful people and celestial beings waiting for you. You're not just going out into this dark void of nothingness. You're being welcomed home. Yeah. It's like a big celebration on the other side. So literally, like, you step out of your shell, you make that cross, you're welcomed, and there's a lot more to the afterlife than people realize. There's a lot more to it than I realized when I started my journey doing professional mediumship. Like, that is an education in itself.
That's true. And I remember I was 10 when my mother's mother died. And I remember her telling me at that time that she kept seeing her sisters who had passed previously. Her sisters were there. Her sisters came to take her home. And so at that point, my mother knew that my grandmother would not be returning from the hospital. So it's interesting. And I've heard several stories from clients that tell me all the time, similar stories, that they their loved one had seen other loved ones that were there, angels and beings in this beautiful light. And so we all have that experience, that similar experience. And Anthony shared that as well after he crossed. He actually said that my grandparents were at the door already before he even crossed.
Wow.
So they were already aware and waiting that, you know, he was going to be there. Something just flashed in.
Here's our Roz coming in to join us.
It was like,
this is the other soul sister, Roz. We introduced you at the beginning of the show, Roz. So we're actually talking about how in mediumship sessions people are it's coming through about the dying process and what's waiting on the other side. And Terry Ann was talking about some of her experiences. Ding! So
I'm sorry.
Getting to be present at someone's death transition is a real privilege. It's a very beautiful thing. And I always thought it'd be wonderful to work for hospice. I actually want to go back to playing harp for hospice, just hospice, to go in and just play harp and maybe sing for people. And I'd certainly be willing to talk about the dying process if they allowed me. But I don't know, Roz, what's your take on death? What is death to you?
To me, death is just going out one door and going in another one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think from the time I was really little, when you're little, you don't realize that you're seeing outside of this dimensional field. So when you're seeing spirits and angels and you're seeing all those things, and I would, be describing that to my mother, and, when I was really little, and it just seemed so natural. I mean, it was just such a thin veil between here and there. And so I think I've always kind of looked at death that way. And when I have been with family members, my mother included, when she was crossing over, the experiences that she had before she passed, where she was being visited by her father, who, died when I was a little girl. She had my brother, who had passed and, was coming to be with her along with my dad. She woke up one night and she could feel someone sitting on the foot of the bed, and there was an indentation and everything. And she woke up and she looked, and my dad was sitting there, and he'd been gone for 10 years before she passed. So
It looked good.
I think, it just becomes a very natural passing from one frequency to another to me.
Carrie Ann was saying that Anthony told her that relatives were standing in the doorway, and aunt and uncle, is that what it was, were standing?
my grandparents, so his great-grandparents.
Before he actually crossed. So
Yeah.
they know. So what that tells me something, you said in your book, your and Anthony's book about this whole experience, is that this was one of his times he could exit, and he was meant to exit at this time. So that really corroborates that, because spirit knows he's going. It's not a surprise to them. They're right there. And that just also shows you too, people ask questions like, do my loved ones know what's going on in my life? Yes, they do. Yes,
Oh, yeah.
they absolutely do. Including when it's your time to cross. And it's not something, we were talking about how, like talking about death doulas and things of that sort, just trying to ease the process and help people not be afraid of the thought of death. But it's a society-wide approach.
I think another thing that my mom mentioned to me was that this was probably about maybe 2 or 3 months before she passed over. She again, she was asleep and she awakened. And my mother was legally blind, by the way. So, I mean, she had macular degeneration. So when she's awakening and she's seeing these people there, I mean, she said it was, they were there, you know, but she couldn't see well enough, but she saw them, right, with her third eye, with her heart. She knew they were there. And she actually asked me about this. That she awakened one night and she said there was she woke up and she could clearly see there was like a hallway, and it was very well lit, and at the end of that hallway my grandfather was standing there, and he had his hand extended out to her, and he just said, "Whenever you're ready." So I don't know. I mean, I've been hearing stories like that ever since I was young. It's a lot different when it's, you know, when it's family. And of course, you feel the sadness that they're going to be leaving. But at the same time, I mean, you feel a joy too that they're not they're not going by themselves. They're going, you know. And when my mom passed, there were some very paranormal and amazing things that went on, um, that was very related to my dad, things he said, things he did. And there were other people present, and we all went, "Oh, okay,
Hi, Dad.
let's get the party going on now." So I think it's just a very normal part of our lives, and it's sad that people have the level of fear that they have about it.
I really think that our pervasive culture of being afraid of death also drives the obsession with youth and with not revering, not respecting our elderly the way that they do in other countries and has been more tradition. It all goes hand in hand. It's fear of death that drives that. Getting older is something to be avoided at all costs. Dying is the worst. So, it all comes kind of hand in hand and drives that machine. It's not something that's going to be changed easily, but actually it wouldn't be changed, it would be going back to the way it used to be when death was not something to be so feared. People be sad. I mean, it's normal to be sad that you're going to miss them in their physical form. Even as a medium, it's not the same. The relationship is not the same, but we still have the relationship. So it's normal to miss the people who cross, but it's silly to fear something that you know is going to happen to every one of us. We're all going to be born. We're all going to die. That's a given.
Yeah. And there's a lot of fear going around right now, a lot of fear.
Mm-hmm.
Stay in the house, you're going to get the COVID, don't leave your house. And if you do leave your house, have 6 feet in these masks, and all this fear is generating around people. And so they're really afraid, and I think I was telling my mom, like, if that's how you're meant to go and that was in your contract, say, to go, it's like, you can hide up in your little house in the corner, and if it's your time, it's your time. Like with Anthony, we couldn't have done anything. There was a lot of guilt that I had around it in the beginning that, I could have saved him. If he would have called me, I would have brought him to the hospital, something. And, as I went on through time and I was able to connect with him more, I understood that there was nothing that I could have done. And I think so that's important for people to understand. You come to a point where you have to realize that there is nothing that you could have done. If it's somebody's time to go, I do truly believe it's their time to go.
That kind of segues into something I was reading about recently about the increase in suicide rate in the last 12 years, I think it is. It's up significantly higher. And that's probably the hardest death I've dealt with. Is I've had numerous people I know commit suicide, and when someone chooses to leave, it's always hard. But I think it comes back to one of my favorite books that I recommend all the time, The Four Agreements, and that infamous section within it that don't take things personally, and that includes suicide. Suicide is not about you. It's not about the people that are left kind. It's not about them choosing to leave you. It's solely about their journey, what's going on with them, their thought process at that time. Some people simply reach a point where they can't tolerate the pain anymore, whatever, whether it's mental, physical, emotional, and they choose to go. And if we can accept death as a natural part of life, we know we'll see them again. We know that they're going to be out of pain, and that's not a terrible thing. You know, it's, we're going to miss them, and it's awful. It's sad, but that, I think it would help. I think with that whole process, if people can step outside of that thinking it's about them in any way. But it is a natural reaction, I think, to that type of situation, and to even a situation like what happened with Anthony that was out of your control. But he's your child, even though he's as an adult, he's your child, and I think it's a very natural reaction to think, if you just called me, why didn't you tell me you were hurting, you know, had problems? But we can't fix everything, can we?
No, and I've even had clients who've had people that have passed through suicide, you know, their loved ones. And, you know, there's always like a point where either they haven't reached out to them at all, so they have guilt that why didn't they tell me? Why couldn't they have just told me they were hurting and I could have helped them? Or they had reached out and maybe they didn't realize that it was that significant at that time. So I think when you're left here, we're still left with a lot of those human emotions that go into all of this. So we have the guilt and the despair, and all of that goes along with the grieving process.
It is
Heartbreaking, though, that guilt, you know, to lose your loved one is overwhelming enough. But then, like you were mentioning, even though that was a different situation with Anthony, I mean, you still have guilt. You still have guilt, you know, where you're, you know, you taking the I thing. I am so powerful. I could have done this.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's.
I think what helped me a lot too is I wrote a lot of letters to him. So I was able to verbalize what I was feeling. And I tell my clients that too. If you're feeling something like guilt or, you know, despair, try to write it out and get it out, and read it and see what you're actually talking about. Because when you sort of write it out and look at it, then you can sort of have a new perspective about it. So I think it's important. I wrote him a lot of letters. I was very angry letters I wrote him. I went from being sad to angry. So I would write these angry letters, you know, but it was able to help get it out of my body.
absolutely, it's very cathartic to do that, and very healthy. And maybe also by releasing some of those negative emotions like anger and guilt, clears your energetic field, that you can start hearing them and seeing them and noticing the signs that your loved ones are giving you that they're still with you, which is really important to the healing process, so that you can start grasping and embracing the fact that you haven't lost them. You lost the shell their body was in, and that's it. The soul goes on. So what do you do when someone is dying? If you know someone who's dying, one thing I've heard over and over, and I'm sure you've all heard it too, is people who are dying, or actually even people who might die, they have some, let's say they have a terminal diagnosis, or it's close to that. People don't want to talk. People stop talking to them. People stop socializing with them, connecting with them, because they don't know what to say. And I think that's very sad. When these people need their loved ones, their friends the most, they often get isolated. So just something to think about. Better to look up online and see some things that you shouldn't say and things that are helpful, because there's all kinds of websites where people who are in these serious health issues will tell you the things that help them to hear. And some of the things we think are so loving and kind actually are like triggers for them. So it would be good to take a look at that.
I think too, you know, it's hard. Like, I have a number of friends who've passed in the last few years, and when, you know, not only do we not know what to say at times, But they don't necessarily want to talk about it either,
Yes, that's right.
because I had a couple of really good friends, both of whom knew that they were dying. Neither one of them wanted to ever talk about that, you know,
And that's okay.
and that's their choice. Maybe they've made their peace with it. I think in the case of one of my friends, she known for a long time, because she just had um, a lot of complicated medical issues, and she had been pretty much bedridden for the last 6 or 7 years of her life. So it's not that she was unaware, she just didn't want to go there. She wanted to talk about her grandchildren and other things,
And
things
so
that were
that's
joyous.
fine.
And you got to respect that.
Yeah, you do. There's nothing that says you have to address that. Some people are in denial. A lot of people like to compartmentalize at that time. They're only going to talk about that with their therapist, their doctors, and then they don't want to be seen as their diagnosis. They don't want to be viewed as a dying person. So, there's something great to be said about continuing to be a sister or a friend, whatever the relationship is, just be that. Just continue to be that. They'll let you know if they want to talk about it, that's for sure.
Yep. And I think it's it's very difficult when you're also in a situation where someone is in denial, and it's a denial by their own choice, and you gotta respect that. But at the same time, you can always, I remember saying to one of my friends, like, if at any point, day or night, like, you feel like you need to say something, or you want to discuss anything, just give me a text. Trust me, I'll be awake. So
Roz is almost always awake.
the insomnia queen. Hey,
And doesn't sleep.
I don't know how I'd get all the energy work I do done if I was asleep. So I just kind of said, okay, I guess
List grows.
this is my role. One of my roles.
Something I think is kind of nice to aim for yourself or a loved one is what we call a peaceful death, where people aren't sobbing and crying and tiptoeing around you, where they're just touching you. Don't be afraid, to touch a person who's passing. Um, thing about that human touch as they're making their exit is very beautiful, and talking to them, and you can comb their hair, brush their hair gently. One thing I remember doing with my grandma, my last visit with my grandma, she had Alzheimer's, and it was very advanced, and my parents she had been staying with my parents, and they had to put her into Alzheimer's unit because she was continuously running away. So the last visit, I was there with my daughter, and my mom and her sister were there, and they were visiting her every day. But my daughter and I were sitting, we had brought some Avon lotion because my grandma sold Avon for 47 years. That's how she raised her daughters. So we brought some Avon lotion, her favorite one, and we were rubbing it into her hands, just massaging it, and she just, like, I could see her visibly. She just went, she did not know who we were. She was real sweet. She's like, "You girls are so sweet." But she enjoyed that attention, and she did not live much past that. That was right at the end and some of her last days. But she had a lot of touch and love, and even though she didn't know who any of us were anymore, she was very grateful to have people there who were talking with her, who were happy to see her and visiting her and touching her, pampering her a little bit, just all these things you can do. And then at that moment where they're actually crossing, just to don't pull away. They're not gone yet. Take that last little bit of time with them when you can touch them physically. What a gift that is. most people that come to me, they're thinking, they talk about it. If I could just hug them one more time, if I could just hold her hand one more time. So think about that when someone you love is crossing. Just be there, and even if you think they can't hear you, they can. They hear you. So they're taking that as their last memory as they cross, and they go home. Again, that's what it is, going home.
And then you can still communicate with them. So just know that they're not gone. I think that's one of the things that's so prevalent now, is that what I'm teaching with the book with Anthony is that the relationship's not over. It's different. I just posted something when Tim and I were in Vegas, and Aunt and I used to love to eat Thai food. And we were looking up on our phone on Yelp on a restaurant to eat. And the first place that popped up was Aunt, and it was Thai food. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's like directing me where to eat too. We're going to go on this adventure. So our adventure was different, but we can still share this adventure. So by sharing those stories, people start to see, oh, I still can have a relationship. They are there. He's doing everything with me that he would be doing before. It's just a different type of relationship.
Oh my gosh, definitely. And the more that you open yourself up to that, the more you'll see how true that is. You'll start receiving more of the signs. I was going to tell you, like last week we were doing our show, and we were talking about something about, and it came up, and I was thinking about a dear friend who crossed fairly recently, and I had a piece of clothing draped over this arm of a chair that's a few feet away from me. And as we were doing the show, I watched one part of it lift up 6 inches and dropped down right as I was thinking about that spirit. And I went, okay. In my head, I'm thinking, all right, you're here. Thanks for letting me know. It can be pretty big things, and it can be small things, but just know, if you believe, you have to allow yourself to come to that place where you believe things are happening, even if you can't see them. It's happening. And eventually, maybe you will see them. You'll definitely feel them.
I think a lot of people, I mean, I know myself, after my brother passed, my mom, my dad, I heard them a lot too. And I I hear voices all the time. People talking to me, I hear more of anything, just this kind of like muffled conversation, and I can't understand everything that's being said, and I don't think it's even being said to me. I think I'm just hearing in a different dimension. But um, I can remember after they passed, and my grandmother too, I was kind of like, how you're like half awake, half asleep. Because even when I'm awake, um, I think sometimes I'm half asleep because just have such a weird sleep pattern. But I remember hearing all of them say my name. So I know they were just stopping in, you know, to see how I was doing. And I can remember not even fully coming awake. I mean, I knew it was them. And so I think, I've had a lot of conversations with clients where their loved one has passed, and then they do feel them, or they sense them close, or they hear their name being called. So I think there are many ways of communication that go
Absolutely.
on.
Oh my goodness, so many things falling over, pictures of the person you were just talking about who was past falling over at that moment. Just all kinds of things. We'll do lights flickering. When my first husband passed away, we had been divorced, and he would do things like uh, I would be sitting in the living room and the TV would turn off, and I'd say, David, if that was you, turn it on again. Boom, TV would turn on. Nobody else was home. Things like that where they'll respond immediately. They'll do something to answer your question as to whether that's them. So give it a try. Open your mind. What do you have to lose? It's not just your imagination. These things, there's this whole world going on around you that you may not be aware of at all, but they wish you would be. Spirit wishes you would be. They would love that. So would your angels, by the way. Same thing.
I think we have to, especially in this time right now, when the veil is so thin and there's so many people who are realizing that they have gifts that they never really even thought about that they have. We have to allow our mind and our heart to open up and receive these contacts and these situations where our loved ones are coming in and just wanting us to know, hey, I'm still here. I still love you. I'm still here.
Absolutely. So I hope that today's show gave you some thoughts to ponder on, and if you have this situation coming up in your life, maybe it'll be helpful for you with the next transition that you experience with a loved one. And if you have any questions, like I said earlier, if you have questions, email them to us. You can send it to my email. I don't mind. It's ivory@sedonasoulsisters.com, and I'll share it with Roz and Terry Ann, and we can respond to you. Even if you're watching this on YouTube later, as most people do, that's fine. So thank you for watching the Sedona Soul Sisters Show. If you'd like more information about us or our services, we invite you to visit our website, sedonasoulsisters.com. Tune in next week when our topic is transforming changes. That's going to be a fun one. So we hope that you have a really beautiful, enlightening week.
Bye.